Welcome back to the Operational Risk Management series. The previous lessons provided a description of the steps taken to identify hazards, assess the initial risk level, identify acceptable risk, and implement controls. During this lesson, the Naval Safety Center experts will describe the fifth step of the ORM process, supervise the application of ORM. Remember that you have control of the pace of the lesson. You can pause, rewind, or rewatch as needed. Let's get started. Step 5, supervise.
When we're supervising, we want to make sure that we monitor, review, and get the appropriate feedback. So when we're looking at the controls that we've implemented, are they the correct controls, are they effective, and do they remain in place through the process? The other thing we want to talk about is, as we're going through this, did we identify any new hazards that we might need to reevaluate and implement controls or assess the risks? So we've identified the hazard, we've assessed the hazard, we made the risk decision, we've implemented controls, and now in the supervision stage we go through that process. It's kind of a loop. So monitor it, make sure it's working, review it. It's a continuous systematic review. We want to make sure that the controls were applied properly, that they're working the way we thought they would work, and if we've identified any additional risks, that we take the appropriate measures to take care of that. The things we want to make sure that we consider during this whole process is the behaviors, the attitude and morale of the crew. Do we have the right skills and knowledge? So if part of your control is swapping out a crew because it's a hot environment or it's an arduous environment, do we maintain the level of skills and knowledge as we swap the crew out? And did we mitigate the risks and accomplish the mission? The feedback, the mission or task feedback, we want to make sure that all the people that were involved in that had the opportunity to talk back or teach back so that we understand what really happened in that whole thing. If you put the feedback into the overall ORM process of how well you were able to execute that mission or task, that's kind of those lessons learned and best practices that we can share either in the Naval Safety Center Lessons Learned Directorate, or as we talked earlier, the Joint Lessons Learned Information System or the Navy Lessons Learned Information System. If you do this also, you want to make sure that you provide written feedback or a formal feedback so that as you continue to do other unit level training exercises or future similar unit level training exercises, that you have that information available to help those people that are trying to mitigate the risks in the future. The thing you might want to also consider as a supervisor is TCRM, using the ABCD model. You can assess the situation, balance your resources, communicate, do, and debrief. So as you're looking to your crew and talking to them, hey, assess the task that we did, assess the mission. How did we do? What was going on? What was happening? Now go on to B, balancing your resources. How do we effectively use our resources, or how didn't we effectively use our resources? How could we have done better there? How was our communication? Did we communicate well with the team? Did we communicate, backup line, or did the folks at command communicate down well with us? Did all those things work well? Then you can talk about how well you accomplished that task or mission, the do and debrief portion. And this becomes a kind of a continuous loop. You can jump in anywhere. If you want to talk about communication first, you can talk about that, but make sure you complete the ABCD loop, and that helps you get a real good idea of how well the controls you put in place and the supervision that you had affected the risk that you initially assessed, going back to step 2 of the process. So monitor, review, and feedback.
You just listened to the last lesson of the ORM series. The lesson covered the actions taken to supervise the application of ORM to determine the effectiveness of the risk controls throughout the mission. Review OpNav Instruction 3500.39 Enclosure 1, Section 8E, and re-watch the lessons as needed.